By the time the orchestra fell silent, Miss Dinah Marston's reticule had already been emptied before half of London. 3 guineas rolled against the crimson velvet rail of the Crayford patron's box. A small bottle of smelling salts struck the carpet. Her handkerchief slipped beneath a chair. A pencil worn almost to the wood landed beside 4 folded notes, one of which opened far enough to reveal the name of a widow who had trusted Dinah with her shame. The blue watered silk reticule itself hung twisted from Dinah's right wrist, its silver clasp bent and its lining torn. Lady Lucasta Crayford stood over the scattered contents, with one gloved hand pressed dramatically to her breast. Her father, Anselm Crayford, Marquess of Crayford, watched Dinah with the calm displeasure of a man who had already decided whose dignity mattered least. Across the narrow division between boxes, Osbert Wetherell, Duke of Halewick, rose to his feet. Yet less than 20 minutes earlier, before the curtain had lifted and before society had turned toward Dinah as though accusation were proof, she had believed the most dangerous object in the theatre was a folded piece of ivory paper. Mr. Bell had met her near the side passage, behind the patrons' boxes, where candlelight caught upon painted scenery and the smell of dust mingled with lamp oil. The theatre manager was a compact, grey-haired man who spoke quietly when the matter concerned money. "Miss Marston, I have the acknowledgement you requested." Dinah glanced toward the Crayford box. Lady Lucasta had not yet taken her seat. Was the donation paid in full? It was. Before noon today, he drew a folded counterfoil from the subscription book carried by his junior clerk. Brown ink marked the number at the top, 47. A small smear of dark green wax stained one edge. The amount is sufficient for the 4 allowances you questioned. Yet the widows were marked as paid. That is why I thought you should have the acknowledgement. Dinah accepted the paper. Her fingers remained steady, though relief and fear moved through her together. For 8 months, she had copied sums that nearly balanced, and payments that appeared complete until compared with the women who were meant to receive them. A pound missing from a widow's allowance produced no scandal in a drawing room. It merely produced a colder room somewhere beyond it. "Who knows you gave this to me?" she asked. "Only my clerk and anyone who noticed us speaking." The junior clerk stood 2 paces away with the acknowledgement book under his arm. Beyond him, Mr. Sloane, Lord Crayford's private secretary, waited beside the high desk with a packet of committee papers. His face was turned toward the passage, but when Mr. Bell said, "Number 47, his attention shifted for the smallest fraction of a second. The junior clerk saw it. So did Dinah, though she could not know what it meant. Sloane inclined his head politely, then left the passage before she had refolded the paper. Dinah placed the counterfoil inside her reticule, beneath the 4 notes and beside the 3 guineas entrusted to her for household errands. The silk was all she possessed from her mother's last gown. Dinah had made the reticule herself years earlier, before 6 seasons of dependence at Crayford House had taught her that even useful women could become nearly invisible if they spoke softly and required little. "Keep it with you," Mr. Bell said. "I will keep the matching stub in the ledger. Do not remove the ledger from the theatre." "I won't." The bell sounded for the audience to settle. Dinah returned to the Crayford box and took her usual place behind Lucasta and Anselm, where she could see the stage only when neither leaned forward. The first act passed beneath music and candlelight. Dinah scarcely heard it. Counterfoil number 47 rested inside the reticule at her wrist. its existence heavier than the 3 guineas. During the interval, Lucasta rose to greet a young viscountess in the neighboring box. Her diamond theatre clasp, worn at the shoulder of her opera cloak, caught the light. Dinah noticed it because Lucasta touched it twice while laughing. A few minutes later, Lucasta returned to her chair and gave a soft cry. "My clasp!" Conversation near them faltered. Lucasta searched the velvet beside her opera glass, then looked beneath the folds of her cloak. "It's gone." Anselm's expression changed from annoyance to command. "When did you last have it?" Before the act ended. Lucasta turned slowly toward Dinah. "You moved my cloak." Dinah had moved it away from a candle bracket when the lining came too near the flame. "I did." "Then you were close enough to take it." The words were not loud, but a theatre box did not require loudness. Heads turned along the tier. Dinah felt attention travel toward her with the precision of a draft beneath a door. "I moved the cloak because it was near the candle," she said. "You saw me do it. I saw you touch it." Anselm placed one hand upon the rail. "This need not become unpleasant, Miss Marston, if the clasp has been caught among your things. Clarity will spare everyone embarrassment." Dinah looked at him. "Whose embarrassment?" Lucasta's companion reached toward the blue reticule. Dinah drew it closer. "Open it," Lucasta said. Dinah heard the expectation beneath the command. A poor relation who refused would appear guilty. A poor relation who obeyed would confirm that her privacy existed only by permission. She lifted her chin. "I'll open it myself." The first catch of the clasp resisted. Before Dinah could try again, Lucasta's companion took hold of the draw cord as though helping. The cord snagged against the carved arm of the chair. The reticule twisted. Pain burned across Dinah's right wrist. The silver clasp bent sideways. The silk tore near the lining, and the contents spilled over the velvet rail. One of the folded notes opened as it fell. Mrs. Eliza Trent's name appeared in Dinah's own hand, above a line recording £2 received instead of 6. Lucasta looked down at it. "More private accounts. A widow's allowance," Dinah said. Her voice sounded controlled. Her pulse did not. Lucasta bent toward the scattered papers. For one moment, her gloved fingers disappeared beneath the handkerchief and folded notes. Then she straightened. "I see no clasp." "Then the search is finished," Dinah replied. "Not until everything is examined," Anselm said. Osbert Wetherell's chair moved in the adjoining box. The sound was not loud, yet it stopped the companion's hand before she could unfold another note. The Duke stepped to the division between the boxes. He did not look first at Dinah. He looked at Anselm. Before a gentleman permits a woman under his protection to be searched before half of London, will the patron of this box state the charge in his own name? Anselm's mouth tightened. "This is a private family matter, Your Grace." It ceased to be private when her possessions were placed upon the rail. No accusation has been made. Then there is no reason to continue the search. Lucasta gathered her cloak more tightly. "My clasp is missing." "That is a fact," Osbert said. "Miss Marston's guilt is not." An usher had entered the rear of the box after hearing the disturbance. Osbert turned to him. "Examine the floor and the chairs. Do not touch Miss Marston's belongings." The usher bowed. Dinah knelt to recover her handkerchief. Osbert did not offer to gather her things. He seemed to understand that help, in that moment, might feel too much like another hand, claiming the right to touch what was hers. The usher moved Lucasta's opera glass and reached beneath the cushion beside it. When he stood, the diamond clasp lay upon his palm. A silence followed so complete that Dinah heard the tuning of a distant violin below. Lucasta stared at the jewel. It must have fallen. Then Miss Marston's reticule was emptied for nothing, Osbert said. Anselm's gaze sharpened. The misunderstanding is concluded. The clasp is found, Dinah replied. She gathered the 3 guineas, the smelling salts, the pencil, and the folded notes. Her right wrist throbbed where the cord had abraded the skin. She lifted the torn reticule and checked the inner pocket. The folded counterfoil was gone. Her breath stopped. The humiliation around her receded. She counted the papers again, though she already knew. 4 notes, no ivory counterfoil. Osbert saw the change in her face. Others were watching the recovered diamond. He watched her. What is missing? Dinah looked at Lucasta, whose gloves were now folded in her lap, and at Anselm, whose expression had become too still. Then she looked at the Duke. A receipt, she said, for money promised to women who never received it. Osbert's attention sharpened. Who knew you had it? Dinah thought of Mr. Bell, the junior clerk, and Mr. Sloane turning away from the side passage. She closed her damaged reticule with one hand around the bent clasp. The man who gave it to me, she said, and the people who could not afford to let me keep it. The music resumed below, but Dinah did not hear the first note. The recovered diamond clasp had restored Lady Lucasta's composure, not Dinah's counterfoil, and the difference mattered more than the entire audience gathering itself back into polite attention. The Dowager Duchess of Halewick entered the Crayford box before Anselm could declare the matter finished. She did not ask permission. Miss Marston will come with me. Lucasta's eyes widened. Surely that isn't necessary. A woman has had her possessions emptied in public and has reported a document missing. Necessity has already been established. The Dowager turned to Dinah. Will you allow me to accompany you? The question, not the invitation, decided her. Dinah rose with the damaged reticule closed beneath her hand. Yes, Your Grace. Osbert remained beside the division between boxes. Mr. Bell should be informed before anyone leaves the theatre. Anselm's mouth hardened. You are making a spectacle of an unfortunate misunderstanding. The spectacle was made when Miss Marston's private papers were spread upon your rail, Osbert replied. What follows will be a record. Mr. Bell arrived within minutes. When Dinah told him the counterfoil was missing, his face lost colour. He led them to the ladies' retiring room beyond the corridor, where 2 candles burned beside a marble washstand and a cushioned bench stood beneath a gilt mirror. The house matron was summoned as an independent witness. The Dowager Duchess remained at Dinah's side. Osbert waited outside the threshold until Dinah looked toward him. You may come in, Your Grace. Only then did he enter. Mr. Bell closed the door but did not lock it. No one else has touched the subscription ledger, he said. It is in the office safe. And the matching stub? Dinah asked. Still attached to the page. Then it must remain there. It will. Osbert moved no nearer to the reticule. Miss Marston, how do you wish to proceed? Dinah looked down at the blue silk. The bent silver clasp leaned crookedly against the temporary pressure of her fingers. One side of the lining had torn near the seam. She could still feel the cord's abrasion around her right wrist. I will examine it myself. Everyone else may watch. The house matron brought a clean white cloth and spread it across the small table. Dinah placed the reticule in the center. She loosened the twisted cord, then opened the damaged clasp without assistance. One by one, she removed the contents. 3 guineas, still complete. The folded handkerchief, the smelling salts bottle, the pencil worn near the wood, 4 notes. The first listed household purchases she had been sent to make. The second contained the names of Mrs. Eliza Trent and Mrs. Margaret Vale. The third reminded her that coal had been charged twice in 1 quarter. The fourth held figures copied from a Crayford subscription summary. No counterfoil. "May I see the torn lining?" Mr. Bell asked. "You may look. Please do not touch it." Dinah lifted the silk toward the candle. A pale sliver showed where the inner seam had pulled apart. At first, she thought it was loose thread. Then she saw the ivory edge of paper caught between the lining and the outer silk. Her breath shortened. There is something inside. No one moved. Dinah inserted 2 fingers carefully beneath the torn seam and drew out a narrow strip of paper no wider than a ribbon. Brown ink crossed one corner. Part of a number remained visible, the upper curve of a 4, the slanting stroke of a 7. Along the opposite edge lay a small smear of dark green wax. Mr. Bell leaned closer. "That is from the counterfoil stock." "Can you identify the number?" Osbert asked. "Not from this fragment alone." Mr. Bell looked toward Dinah, but number 47 was written in the same brown ink, and the acknowledgement bore green wax where the committee packet had sealed against it. The Dowager Duchess studied the torn edge, then the main paper was taken, and this remained behind. Dinah held the strip between steady fingers, or it tore when the lining tore. She looked at Lucaster's gloved hand in memory, disappearing beneath the scattered notes. Either way, no one will say later that this fragment appeared from nowhere. Osbert's gaze rested upon her face. "What record do you require?" "An envelope, plain paper, wax that does not match the fragment, and signatures across the fold." Mr. Bell sent for them at once. While they waited, Dinah placed the strip upon the white cloth and stepped back from the table. No one touched it. When the envelope arrived, the house matron observed as Dinah slid the fragment inside. Mr. Bell folded the flap. The Dowager Duchess applied a small drop of red wax from the matron's writing box. Dinah signed first across the fold. The Dowager signed second. Mr. Bell signed third. He offered the pen to Osbert. The Duke looked at Dinah before answering. "I should not sign." Mr. Bell frowned. "Your Grace, if this becomes evidence, it must not depend upon my title. 3 witnesses are sufficient, and 2 of them are custodians of the place where it was found." Dinah understood what he was doing. He was removing the easiest accusation before it could be made. "Then do not sign," she said. Mr. Bell nodded. "The packet will remain overnight in the theatre safe, inside my locked dispatch box. At 9 tomorrow morning, I will carry it directly to Mr. Latham's chambers in Chancery Lane." "You will carry it yourself?" Dinah asked. "I will. Will it pass through His Grace's hands?" "No," Osbert answered before Mr. Bell could. "It will be entered as received from the theatre manager." Dinah felt something inside her settle. The counterfoil had been stolen because the Crayfords believed a dependent woman's possessions could be treated as common property. This fragment would survive because every hand around it now understood where its authority ended. The house matron took the sealed envelope to Mr. Bell's waiting dispatch box. He locked it in their presence and retained the key. Only after the evidence had left the table did the Dowager Duchess look at Dinah's wrist. That should be washed. Dinah turned toward the marble basin. "I can manage, of course." The Dowager poured clean water without calling a maid. Dinah removed her glove. A narrow red abrasion crossed the inside of her right wrist where the cord had dragged. It was not severe, but the skin burned when the water touched it. She dried the area with the cloths on. Osbert stood several feet away, his attention fixed upon the window rather than her exposed wrist. When she finished, he took a clean linen handkerchief from his coat, but did not approach. May I? Dinah looked at the handkerchief, then at him. Yes. He crossed the space between them and wrapped the linen around her wrist with careful fingers. His touch was brief and precise. He tied the knot loosely enough not to press the abrasion, then stepped back at once. Thank you, she said. You needn't thank me for asking. Mr. Bell returned after securing the dispatch box. Miss Marston, you said the receipt concerned women who had not been paid. Dinah rested her wrapped wrist against the table. 4 widows were marked as having received their full allowances. They did not. How do you know? Osbert asked. Mrs. Trent received £2 instead of 6. Mrs. Vale received nothing for the quarter ending March, though the account shows payment. Mrs. Anne Pritchard received 1 installment where 3 were entered. Mrs. Ruth Miller was told her allowance had been delayed because a subscriber had not honored his pledge. Mr. Bell's expression darkened. Counterfoil 47 proves at least 1 subscriber paid in full. Enough to cover all 4 missing amounts, Dinah said. Osbert became very still. I received 2 complaints about delayed payments. Dinah looked at him. When? Within the last 2 months. 1 from a Bloomsbury clergyman, 1 from the brother of a former actress. What did you do? I wrote to the committee, and Lord Crayford answered. His secretary did. The matter was described as clerical confusion under review. Dinah glanced toward the sealed dispatch box beyond the door. And you accepted that? I did. There was no defense in his voice. I should not have. The Dowager Duchess looked at Dinah. You cannot return to Crayford House tonight. If I do not, they may say I fled. They may say whatever serves them, Osbert said. Dinah turned toward him. And where would you have me go? Before he could answer, his mother spoke. To Halewick House, as my guest. Under my roof, in my name, with every propriety observed. The distinction was deliberate. Dinah heard it. For 1 night, she said. For as long as you choose, the Dowager replied. But never longer, because you believe you owe us obedience. Dinah gathered her 4 notes and 3 guineas into the damaged reticule. She wrapped the torn lining inward and closed the bent clasp as far as it would go. The missing main counterfoil remained somewhere beyond the room. The surviving strip was locked in Mr. Bell's dispatch box. The ledger remained in the theatre safe. For the first time since the contents had spilled, every object still within reach had a known place. When they left by the side entrance, Osbert walked behind Dinah and his mother rather than taking Dinah's arm without asking. The Halewick carriage waited beneath the lamps. As Dinah stepped inside, she saw a Crayford footman at the theatre door. He recognized her, looked at Osbert, and hurried back toward the boxes. Someone would reach Crayford House before she did. Someone would report that the poor relation had left under the Dowager Duchess' protection, while a sealed fragment of counterfoil, number 47, remained beyond the Crayfords' grasp. By 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, 4 women who had never crossed the threshold of Halewick House had become the most important names within it. Mrs. Eliza Trent, Mrs. Margaret Vale, Mrs. Anne Pritchard, Mrs. Ruth Miller. Dinah had written them in a careful column upon a sheet of plain paper, each name followed by the amount promised, the amount entered, and the amount actually received. Her damaged reticule rested beside the writing slope in the Dowager Duchess's morning room, its bent clasp held closed by her hand whenever she moved it. The linen handkerchief Osbert had tied around her right wrist remained in place. The abrasion beneath it was still tender, though the pain had settled into a narrow pulse rather than a burn. At 9 precisely, a footman entered with a message from Chancery Lane. Mr. Bell had delivered the sealed envelope to Mr. Latham's chambers. The signatures across the fold remained unbroken. The solicitor had entered the packet as received directly from the theatre manager. Counterfoil number 47's surviving strip was now under his custody. The original subscription ledger remained locked at Drury Lane. Dinah read the acknowledgement twice before laying it beside her notes. Only then did she allow herself to breathe fully. Osbert stood near the mantel, while his mother sat at the opposite side of the table, with her correspondence unopened. No servant remained in the room. "These are not the original accounts," Dinah said. "They are summaries I copied over several months." Osbert looked at the names rather than reaching for the paper. "May I?" "Yes." He came to the table and read the first line. Mrs. Trent was promised £6. She received 2. Yet the committee entry records the full 6. Yes. His gaze moved downward. Mrs. Vale received nothing for the quarter ending March, though she was marked paid. Mrs. Pritchard received 1 installment where 3 were recorded. Yes. And Mrs. Miller was told the subscriber had not honored his pledge. Dinah touched the edge of the acknowledgement from Mr. Latham. Counterfoil 47 shows that at least 1 relevant donation was paid in full. The Dowager Duchess lifted her eyes. "How did you learn what the women actually received?" "Mrs. Trent spoke to me near the theatre passage before the performance. She recognized me from a committee gathering at Crayford House. She did not ask for money. She asked whether she had offended someone." Osbert's expression altered. "Offended whom?" "The committee. She believed her payment had been reduced because she had behaved improperly." The room became very still. Dinah looked at the column of names. That is what such accounts do when no one answers them. The woman who loses the money begins to believe she has lost favor as well. Osbert read the figures again. "I received 2 complaints. You said so last night. One came from a clergyman in Bloomsbury, the other from the brother of a former actress. Both described delayed payments. And the committee answered that the matter was under review. Mr. Sloane answered in Lord Crayford's name." Dinah lifted her gaze. "Did you request the original disbursement records?" "No." "Did you ask to meet the widows?" "No." His answer came without delay. "I asked for a written explanation. I received one. I accepted the appearance of procedure instead of requiring the result." The honesty of it unsettled her more than an excuse would have done. Men of rank often admitted regret in ways that preserved their innocence. Osbert did not. He stood beside the table and looked at the 4 names as though each were an accusation he intended to remember. "Why did you begin copying the figures?" he asked. "Because the totals nearly balanced." "Nearly?" "Always nearly. A whole missing donation would have been obvious. £1 removed from one widow and 2 from another could be hidden by changing the reporting period." "You saw a pattern." "I saw enough to distrust the explanation." "Why not confront Crayford?" Dinah folded her hands to keep from pressing her tender wrist against the table. A poor relation who accuses the head of the house without proof does not become an investigator. She becomes homeless. The Dowager Duchess's face tightened. Before either of them could answer, the door opened and a footman entered, carrying a silver tray. A letter lay upon it, sealed with dark green wax. Dinah recognized the angular hand before she saw the signature. Mr. Sloane had written it. The footman offered the tray to the Dowager Duchess, but Dinah rose. "It is addressed to me." She broke the sea-seals herself. The letter contained no inquiry about her wrist, no apology for the search, and no mention of the recovered diamond clasp. Lord Crayford required her return before noon. She was to surrender every memorandum, list, copied figure, private paper, and note connected to the relief subscription. Failure to comply would be treated as disloyalty to the household that had supported her for 6 years. Osbert read her expression. "You won't return." Dinah looked at him. The words had been spoken with protection in mind. They still landed as a command. "That decision is mine." His jaw tightened, then released. "Yes." He stepped back from the table. "What will you do?" The correction was immediate. Dinah noticed that before she noticed anything else. "I will answer." The Dowager Duchess pushed a clean sheet of paper toward her. "Would you like my secretary?" "No. I will write in my own hand." Dinah sat and drew the pencil from her reticule. She paused only long enough to choose every sentence carefully. She informed Lord Crayford that the notes were her personal records, created by her labor, and preserved because they concerned funds entrusted to a charitable committee. She would not return while the theatre accusation remained unexplained and counterfoil number 47 remained missing. Her clothing and ordinary belongings could be released to a servant sent under the Dowager Duchess's authority. She would provide witnessed copies of relevant figures to the full committee, not surrender them privately to the household whose accounts were in question. When she finished, she sanded the page and handed it to Osbert. "You may read it." "May I suggest changes?" "No." A flicker of something almost like admiration touched his face. "I wouldn't dare." He read the letter and returned it without altering a word. The Dowager Duchess sealed it with her own plain wax. Not the Halewick crest, so the answer remained Dinah's rather than a ducal challenge disguised as correspondence. The footman carried it away. The reply came before noon. Lord Crayford regretted that Miss Marston had allowed outside influence to disturb her judgment. She was no longer welcome at Crayford House. Her allowance would cease after the present quarter. Her belongings would be packed at the household's convenience. Dinah stood beside the window while the words were read aloud. For 6 years, she had balanced accounts, answered invitations, mended household omissions, and made herself useful enough to remain. Her reward for asking where widow's money had gone was the removal of the roof above her head. The Dowager Duchess came to stand beside her. "You may remain here," Dinah turned. "Your Grace, I cannot become another indefinite obligation. You would be my guest, not my obligation. For how long? Until you choose another arrangement. No bargain, no gratitude required, no promise concerning my son." Osbert did not move from the mantel. He did not add his title to the invitation. That restraint allowed Dinah to accept it. "Then I will remain for now," she said, "but my letters will go where I choose, and I will attend every interview concerning my notes." "Agreed," the Dowager said. Osbert studied the handwritten summaries. "Crayford knows these are not original ledgers." "Yes." "He knows they cannot prove the entire diversion alone." "Yes." "Yet he has ended your allowance and demanded every page." Dinah closed the damaged reticule around her worn pencil. "Then he fears what the pages may lead us to." Osbert looked from the 4 widows' names to the pencil in her hand. "We shall discover why a Marquess fears a woman with a pencil." Dinah had spent 6 years making herself small enough to remain useful. By noon, on that Sunday, the work that had made her invisible had become the reason powerful men could no longer afford to ignore her. On Monday morning, the housekeeper placed a small brass key in Dinah's palm and told her that no one would enter the rooms without knocking. The key was plain, worn smooth at the bow, and lighter than the 3 guineas inside her damaged reticule. Yet it carried a weight Dinah had never been permitted to keep. At Crayford House, doors had opened for her when she was useful and closed when she became inconvenient. This one belonged to a sitting room, a bedchamber, and a narrow dressing room beside the Dowager Duchess's apartments. Nothing had been arranged near the Duke's private rooms. Nothing suggested secrecy. Dinah closed her fingers around the key. "Thank you." The housekeeper bowed. "Her Grace wished you to have it yourself." A maid had already placed Dinah's few recovered belongings inside. The parcel from Crayford House contained 2 gowns, several books, her mother's writing box, and no apology. Her account summaries remained with her. The blue watered silk reticule lay upon the small desk, its silver clasp still bent and its lining folded inward around the tier. The Dowager's seamstress had offered to repair it. Dinah had declined. She had accepted only a narrow blue ribbon, which she looped through the cord to keep the reticule closed until she chose what should be mended and how. The linen handkerchief around her right wrist came away that morning. A faint red mark remained, tender when she bent her hand, but the skin had begun to heal. Dinah had just set the brass key beside her writing slope when a footman announced the Duke of Halewick. Osbert entered, carrying 2 sheets of paper. The Dowager Duchess followed him and took a chair near the window with her embroidery, making the propriety of the meeting unmistakable. Osbert looked at the key, then at Dinah. "My mother tells me the rooms are satisfactory." "They are more than satisfactory." "Good." He placed the papers on the desk but did not push them toward her. "I have written a plan for the next several days." Dinah looked at the first line. "A plan for the investigation and for your safety." The distinction tightened something in her chest. "Go on. No unannounced visitors, no unnecessary outings. Any correspondence connected to the relief accounts should be copied before it leaves the house." "Who decides whether an outing is unnecessary?" Osbert paused. "Until we know who took the counterfoil, I would prefer that you remain here, except when the inquiry requires otherwise." "That is not what I asked." His gaze held hers. "I would decide." "And who decides whether a visitor may see me?" "My mother or I would be informed first." "Informed or asked?" The Dowager Duchess drew her needle through the cloth and said nothing. Osbert's hand rested beside the written plan. "You believe I am trying to confine you. I believe you are using danger to make permission sound reasonable. Someone removed evidence from your reticule in a crowded theatre. Another person may already be trying to alter the records. Then we must protect the evidence." Dinah placed the brass key between them. "I am not evidence." His expression changed, though not quickly enough to hide the resistance beneath it. "No. I will accept a carriage and a companion when I leave. I will tell the Dowager where I am going. I will not submit personal letters for inspection." "I did not ask to inspect personal letters. Your plan says correspondence." He looked down at his own wording. "Then it is badly written." "It is accurately written. You meant all letters connected to the matter." "Because a careless sentence could be used against you." "A copied sentence could also be taken from my control." Osbert drew a breath. The instinct to command passed visibly through him. Then he took up the first sheet and tore it once across the middle. "You may write freely. Any letter that contains evidence facts will be copied, only with your knowledge, and the copy will be marked as such." "Agreed. Visitors may call if my mother or another proper companion is present." "Agreed. When you leave. I ask that you use the carriage and take a servant." "Ask. Dinah watched him set the torn plan aside. He had yielded, but not easily. The effort mattered because it revealed the problem had not vanished. "There is another condition," she said. "Yours, mine. I will attend every interview involving my notes, the widow's, or the accounts I examined." Osbert's face became still. "Some witnesses may speak more freely to a man of rank. Then they may speak to you first. I will still hear what concerns my work. There may be accusations unsuitable for you to repeat. They are not unsuitable when they are being built upon my records." The Dowager Duchess lowered her embroidery. "Osbert, do not ask me to support you. Miss Marston is correct." He looked toward his mother, then back at Dinah. "You will attend, and I will be introduced as the person who found the discrepancies, not as a distressed dependent under your protection. That is accurate. Accuracy will do." By the end of the morning, the second sheet contained a plan written in both their hands. The sealed strip remained with Mr. Latham in Chancery Lane. The original theatre ledger remained at Drury Lane. Dinah's summaries remained hers. Interviews would be witnessed. Letters concerning evidence would be copied openly. No object would move without its custodian being named. When Osbert left, the torn first plan remained on the desk. Dinah did not throw it away. It was useful to know how easily protection could begin by writing another person's boundaries for her. On Tuesday afternoon, a copy of the public subscription list arrived from the theatre committee. It was not an original record and carried no private disbursement pages. Dinah examined it in the Dowager's morning room with Osbert seated opposite and the door open. She placed the list beside her handwritten summaries. "Do not begin with the missing amounts," she said. "Begin with what appears honest." Osbert studied the large columns of donations, names, dates, sums, and acknowledgements. Everything a patron expects to see. The totals agree, because the donations were entered correctly. She slid her own page beneath the public list. Now look at the payments. The relief entries had been copied by meeting date rather than by the quarter in which the donation was received. A subscriber could see his full generosity preserved in ink. A widow saw only whatever portion reached her door. Dinah marked 4 lines with her worn pencil. The large sums remain visible. The small payments change. Osbert leaned closer without crossing to her side of the table. £2 withheld here, 3 there, 4 from Mrs. Trent. Together they become substantial. Separately, they become embarrassing to complain about. He looked at the names. The method depends upon shame. Yes, rich donors assume their money arrived because the committee looks respectable. Poor widows assume they should be grateful for whatever appears. And the reporting periods prevent an easy comparison. A bold theft would invite inquiry. A divided account invites boredom. A quiet, humorless breath left him. "You have a severe opinion of committees. I have read their arithmetic." At supper that evening, the Dowager Duchess asked why Osbert had ever attached his name to the relief subscription. He turned his wineglass by the stem, but did not drink. "Because my mother once lent her name to another charitable committee." The Dowager's hands stilled. They printed Duchess of Halewick across every appeal. He continued. "They never allowed her to examine a payment." Dinah looked at the older woman. "And when the fund failed?" The committee explained that I had never understood business, the Dowager said. "My rank was useful until responsibility was required." Osbert's voice remained controlled. "I learned that authority left unused becomes decoration." Dinah met his gaze. "And authority used without consent becomes something else." He did not defend himself. Yes. A footman entered, carrying a folded message marked with Mr. Bell's hand. Osbert opened it, read once, then passed it directly to Dinah. Mr. Bell confirmed that stub number 47 remained attached to the theatre ledger. The volume had not left the safe, yet that afternoon a man describing himself only as an intermediary had offered 200 guineas to purchase it. Mr. Bell had refused. The man had not asked for the theatre's subscription records in general. He had named the exact volume and the entry that needed to disappear. Dinah folded the message along its original crease. Somewhere in London, someone believed 200 guineas were cheaper than allowing a poor relation's question to survive. Mrs. Eliza Trent was waiting outside the subscription office when Dinah arrived at Drury Lane on Wednesday morning, seated upon a narrow bench beneath a notice requesting that beneficiaries apply only during appointed hours. The office door stood less than 6 feet away. Mrs. Trent had not knocked. She held a worn bonnet in both hands and watched every passing theatre servant, as though one of them might decide she had no right to remain. Dinah stepped down from the closed Halewick carriage with the Dowager Duchess behind her and Osbert following last. Her right wrist no longer required linen, though a faint mark remained where the reticule cord had dragged across the skin. The blue-watered silk reticule hung from her other hand, its bent clasp secured by the narrow ribbon she had tied through the cord. Mrs. Trent rose too quickly. "Miss Marston, I didn't know whether you'd come. You should not have been left waiting outside." Dinah glanced toward the notice. "Did someone refuse you entry?" "No, I didn't ask." The widow lowered her eyes. It seemed better not to trouble anyone. The words carried the exact injury Dinah had described to Osbert. Money had been withheld, yet Mrs. Trent had concluded that her own presence was the offense. Dinah sat beside her on the bench. "You are not troubling anyone. This office exists because women such as you were promised assistance." Mrs. Trent twisted the bonnet ribbon around one finger. Lady Lucasta said the committee couldn't have every recipient arriving with questions. Osbert stopped several paces away. The Dowager Duchess remained near the carriage entrance, close enough to preserve propriety, and far enough not to crowd the widow. Dinah kept her voice quiet. "When did Lady Lucasta say that?" "In March. I went to Crayford House after the second payment failed to come." "Did she receive you privately?" "In the front hall. A maid was there." "What else did she say?" Mrs. Trent looked toward Osbert, then away. He understood the hesitation and moved farther down the passage, turning his attention toward a theatre bill posted on the wall. Only then did she answer. She said ladies who received assistance shouldn't trouble patrons with vulgar arithmetic. Then she said the Crayford name couldn't survive another public embarrassment. Dinah's pencil paused over the small notebook she had drawn from her reticule. Those exact words, "as near as I can remember." Did she explain what embarrassment she meant? No. She looked toward the door as if someone might hear her. That was not proof of fraud. It was not proof of debt. It was a glimpse of fear beneath Lucasta's polish, nothing more. Dinah wrote the sentence exactly as Mrs. Trent remembered it and marked it as recollection, not verified fact. "Before we continue, have you eaten?" Mrs. Trent's expression tightened. "I'm not here to beg." "I did not ask whether you had come to beg." Dinah closed the notebook. "I asked whether you had eaten." The widow admitted to a crust of bread before leaving Bloomsbury. Osbert spoke to a footman without approaching. Within minutes, tea, warm rolls, and a small dish of eggs arrived from a nearby coffee-house. He placed the tray on a side table and addressed Mrs. Trent rather than Dinah. "The theatre may reimburse me when its fund is properly administered." A surprised laugh escaped the widow. "I won't object to that arrangement, Your Grace." Dinah waited until she had eaten before taking down her statement. Mrs. Trent had been promised £6. 2 had arrived. A second payment was described as delayed. A third was never mentioned. Dinah read every sentence aloud, and Mrs. Trent corrected the date of her visit to Crayford House by 3 days. Only when the widow was satisfied did she sign with a careful, uneven hand. Mr. Bell emerged from the office as Dinah sanded the page. He apologized for not knowing Mrs. Trent had arrived. "No one informed me." "That is the difficulty," Dinah said. "Women who have already been made ashamed do not always announce themselves." Mr. Bell received the original statement for the theatre record and gave Dinah a witnessed copy. Mrs. Trent left in a hired carriage ordered by the Dowager Duchess, not as a public act of patronage, but because the widow's shoes were too worn for the walk back to Bloomsbury. Only after the carriage had turned from the street did Dinah enter the subscription office. The original ledger lay locked inside the safe until Mr. Bell opened it in the presence of the theatre treasurer and his junior clerk. Osbert stood on the opposite side of the room. No Halewick servant entered. Mr. Bell placed the volume upon a high desk and turned to the entry dated the 10th May. Stub number 47 remained sewn into the binding. Its brown ink recorded amount, and dark green wax mark matched Dinah's memory of the whole counterfoil. The narrow strip itself remained sealed with Mr. Latham in Chancery Lane. No comparison could yet be made without the solicitor and the unopened packet. Dinah leaned close enough to read, but did not touch the page. "The amount is unchanged." "Yes," Mr. Bell said, "and the stub has not been removed." "Who has opened this ledger since Saturday?" "Only I, the treasurer, and my junior clerk. Every opening is now witnessed." Osbert looked toward the clerk. "You were present when Mr. Bell issued the counterfoil to Miss Marston." The young man swallowed. "I saw him give her a folded paper, Your Grace. I couldn't read the number from where I stood." "Did anyone else see?" Dinah asked. The clerk hesitated. Mr. Bell's gaze sharpened. "Answer only what you remember." Mr. Sloane was near the acknowledgement desk. Dinah's pencil stilled. How near? Near enough to hear Mr. Bell speak. When he said number 47, Mr. Sloane turned his head. "Did he see me place the paper in my reticule?" "I believe he did, miss, but I couldn't swear where his eyes were every moment." "Then we record that he was present, heard the number, and had the opportunity to observe. Nothing more." The clerk nodded with visible relief. Osbert studied the attached stub. Sloane left the passage immediately afterward. "Yes, Your Grace." "Mr." Bell closed one hand around the safe key. "There is more. He returned on Monday afternoon." "For the ledger?" Dinah asked. "He said an error had been found in the subscription entries. He asked whether stub 47 could be corrected." "Corrected how?" "Removed and copied again." "Did he bring written authority from the committee?" "No." "Did he offer money?" Osbert asked. "Not directly. He said the Crayford Committee remembered those who made its work easier." Dinah wrote the words exactly, and later an unnamed intermediary offered 200 guineas for the whole ledger. "The following afternoon," Mr. Bell confirmed. Osbert's gaze moved from the stub to Dinah. Opportunity before the theft. Interference after it. "A pattern," she said. "Not yet proof that Mr. Sloane took the counterfoil or ordered anyone else to take it. You believe coincidence still possible?" "I believe conclusions become weaker when they run ahead of facts," His expression suggested impatience, but he did not challenge her. The restraint mattered. Dinah asked the junior clerk whether Sloane had spoken to Lucasta before the interval. He had not seen them together. Mr. Bell had no record of who entered the Crayford box during the first act. The gap remained. Sloane had known about number 47. Whether he had carried that knowledge to Lucasta was still unproved. Mr. Bell returned the ledger to the safe. The treasurer witnessed the lock. One key remained with Mr. Bell and the second with the treasurer. As Dinah put away her notebook, Osbert looked toward the basket of bread the footman had brought for their return journey. You questioned Mrs. Trent, examined the ledger, and have eaten nothing. That is an observation, not an order. I am aware. The answer came with the faintest strain. He picked up the basket, then stopped before handing it to her. Will you eat before we return to Halewick House? Dinah looked at him. 2 days earlier, he would have phrased the same concern as a decision already made. I will, she said. Thank you for asking. His mouth shifted toward a smile. You make improvement sound like penance. That depends upon how often it is required. In the carriage, she accepted a roll and divided it with the Dowager Duchess. Osbert sat opposite, his attention upon the street rather than upon whether Dinah finished every bite. At Halewick House, a cream-coloured envelope waited on the entrance table. Lady Ashcombe requested their presence at dinner on Friday. The Crayfords had also been invited. Beneath the formal courtesy of the note lay a clear purpose. The questions that had begun beside a widow on a theatre bench would now be carried into a dining room where rank could no longer pretend not to hear them. By the time Lady Lucasta Crayford offered her apology, every person at Lady Ashcombe's table had already decided which woman was expected to be grateful. The dining room glowed with candlelight reflected in silver and crystal. Dinah sat between the Dowager Duchess and an elderly baroness whose silence carried more judgment than most people's speeches. Osbert occupied the opposite side of the table, close enough to hear every word and far enough that no one could pretend Dinah spoke through him. Lucasta wore pale rose silk and the recovered diamond clasp at her shoulder. The jewel caught the light whenever she turned, an unnecessary reminder that society had restored her property within minutes, while Dinah's missing counterfoil had remained unmentioned for nearly a week. Anselm Crayford sat beside his daughter with the composed expression of a man attending a dinner given for his convenience. Lady Ashcombe allowed the soup to be removed before setting down her spoon. Lady Lucasta, you told me you wished to correct an unfortunate impression. Lucasta's smile appeared with practiced ease. Yes, I have been deeply distressed that Miss Marston misunderstood what occurred at the theatre. Dinah folded her hands in her lap. What did I misunderstand? There was never an accusation. My clasp was missing. Everyone was anxious. A simple precaution became painful because emotions were high. Whose emotions? A small pause passed around the table. Lucasta's smile tightened. Mine, certainly. Anyone would be distressed to lose a valuable jewel, and anyone would be distressed to have her private possessions emptied before an audience. No one intended humiliation. Intention did not keep my papers closed. Anselm leaned back in his chair. Miss Marston, Lady Lucasta has expressed regret. Continued offense serves no one. She has expressed regret that I understood what happened. Lucasta's cheeks colored. The clasp was found. The misunderstanding ended. The misunderstanding ended, Dinah said. The humiliation did not. The elderly baroness beside her gave the faintest nod. Anselm noticed. Surely gratitude would be more appropriate than accusation. His Grace intervened. Your reputation was preserved. Dinah felt every gaze move toward Osbert. He did not speak. He did not rescue her from the silence. The choice steadied her. My reputation was not created by His Grace, she said. It existed before he entered the box, and it did not become respectable because a duke noticed it had been injured. Lucasta's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. You make a great deal of a mistake. A mistake is taking the wrong cloak. Asking a dependent woman to display her private belongings before strangers requires a series of decisions. Lady Ashcombe's attention sharpened, and one of those belongings was a charity acknowledgement. Anselm turned toward her, an alleged acknowledgement. Mr. Bell issued it, Dinah said. Stub number 47 remains in the theatre ledger. The counterfoil itself is missing. A torn strip remains sealed with Mr. Latham in Chancery Lane. Lucasta looked down too quickly. It was only a moment, but Dinah saw it. Lady Ashcombe did as well. The committee books must be opened, the older woman said. Lucasta's composure changed. Not anger, fear. It appeared in the sudden stillness of her shoulders and the way her gaze moved toward her father before returning to the table. That would be unnecessary, she said. Public attention has already harmed the Crayford name. The phrase echoed Mrs. Trent's recollection. The Crayford name could not survive another public embarrassment. Dinah did not seize upon it as proof. She simply remembered. Anselm placed 2 fingers beside his plate. Charitable committees cannot function if every copied figure becomes a social trial. Then explain the figures, Lady Ashcombe replied. Miss Marston, what exactly did you find? Dinah did not look at Osbert. The large donations were entered correctly. Subscribers could see their names, the sums, and the dates. The irregularities appeared among the smaller disbursements. Mrs. Trent was promised £6 and received 2. Mrs. Vale received nothing for a quarter marked paid. Mrs. Pritchard received 1 installment where 3 were entered. Mrs. Miller was told a subscriber had failed to honor his pledge. You copied those amounts yourself? Lady Ashcombe asked. Yes, my notes are summaries, not original ledgers. Anselm cut in. Then they prove nothing. Osbert's voice entered the room for the first time. Miss Marston had not finished. The words were quiet. Anselm looked across the table. Your Grace, I am answering an allegation against my committee. You are interrupting the person Lady Ashcombe questioned. Osbert did not continue the argument. He turned his attention back to Dinah. Please finish. The restraint was deliberate. Dinah felt it as clearly as she had felt his hand stop above the breadbasket at Drury Lane. My notes do not prove who diverted the money, she said. They prove that payments recorded as complete were not received in full. Counterfoil 47 confirms at least 1 donation was paid. The matching stub remains at the theatre. The narrow strip remains sealed. The original disbursement records must be compared against the women's statements. Lady Ashcombe looked at Anselm. Will you produce them after an internal review? When? When the committee considers it proper. I am a patroness of that committee. You are not its clerk. Lucasta drew a quick breath. The answer had gone too far. Lady Ashcombe's face did not change. No, I am one of the women whose name persuaded subscribers to trust it. I will not be used as decoration while widows go unpaid. For a moment, Osbert's gaze moved toward his mother. Dinah understood why. The same wound had been given a second voice. Anselm lifted his wineglass. This is neither the time nor the place. Then I will select both, Lady Ashcombe said. The records will be requested formally. No one spoke of the matter again during dinner, but the room had altered. Dinah was no longer the only person expected to explain herself. After the ladies withdrew, Lucasta remained near the mantel, speaking too brightly to a Viscountess who listened without warmth. Dinah stood beside a tall window overlooking the square. The Dowager Duchess remained within sight with Lady Ashcombe. Osbert approached, but stopped at a respectful distance. "You spoke well," he said. "I spoke accurately. That too." Dinah looked toward Lucasta. She was afraid when Lady Ashcombe mentioned opening the books. "You noticed. Fear is not proof." "No." He paused. "The gossip will worsen after tonight." "I know." A formal declaration could stop much of it. Dinah turned toward him. "What declaration?" "That you are under my personal protection. No one would question your presence at Halewick House, and anyone repeating the theatre accusation would answer to me." "No." His expression tightened. "Hear me first." I heard the phrase. "I am not proposing ownership." Society would understand it as ownership. Society understands rank. That is the problem. He glanced toward the room, then lowered his voice. "I can prevent them from isolating you. By teaching them, I am respectable because a duke has claimed responsibility for me. That is not what I intend." Intent does not control meaning. The words settled between them. Osbert did not answer at once. Dinah continued before his concern could harden into command. "Stand beside me when truth requires power. Do not make my name dependent upon yours." His gaze held hers. "You believe part of me would find that dependence useful. I believe part of you finds every danger easier when you can control the answer." He absorbed the judgment without turning away. "Perhaps. Then do not make me respectable by making me yours." The silence that followed was not romantic. It was more difficult than that. It required him to surrender a solution his rank had always made available. At last, he inclined his head. "Your name remains your own." On Saturday morning, a messenger from Lady Ashcombe arrived before breakfast with a folded proof sheet. A compositor at the Observer, accustomed to setting Lady Ashcombe's charity notices, had recognized Dinah's name in a paid column and sent the page to her before Sunday's edition went to press. Lady Ashcombe had forwarded it at once. Dinah unfolded the sheet upon the Dowager's morning-room table. Heavy black type named her as a thief, a falsifier of accounts, and a woman using ducal interest to blackmail the Crayford family. The article claimed counterfoil number 47 had been found among her private papers at Crayford House. It gave the exact amount written upon the missing acknowledgement. Osbert read the final paragraph over her shoulder without touching the page. "This was prepared before dinner." Yes, Dinah placed one finger beside the printed number. The sealed strip could not reveal the entire amount. Her personal summaries did not contain the counterfoil number. Someone had supplied both. She looked at Lucasta's fear in memory, at Mr. Sloane turning from the side passage, and at the folded paper that had vanished while her private life lay exposed upon velvet. The accusation in the theatre had not failed. It had merely changed form. By Sunday morning, all of London would be invited to search Dinah's character as freely as Lucasta had searched her reticule. By 8 o'clock on Sunday morning, the Observer had carried Dinah's name into drawing rooms she had never entered. The article appeared beneath a column devoted to charitable misconduct, though its accusation was directed not at the trustees who had failed 4 widows, but at the poor relation who had copied their figures. Miss Dinah Marston, it declared, had removed counterfoil number 47 from Crayford House, altered relief accounts, and used the Duke of Halewick's interest to threaten a respected family. The paper gave the exact amount written upon the missing acknowledgement. It claimed the counterfoil had later been found among Dinah's private papers in the desk she once used at Crayford House. No servant was named. No witness was offered. The lie depended upon repetition rather than proof. Dinah read the column in the Dowager Duchess's morning room, while the blue watered silk's reticule rested beside her hand. Its bent clasp remained secured by the narrow ribbon. The strip torn from counterfoil 47 remained sealed with Mr. Latham in Chancery Lane. The original ledger and matching stub remained at Drury Lane. The main counterfoil had not been recovered. Yet the newspaper knew both its number and amount. "They either have the paper," Dinah said, "or they saw it before it vanished." Osbert stood at the mantel with Lady Ashcombe's proof sheet, folded beneath one hand, and the published newspaper open before him. He had spent Saturday attempting to stop the column. The editor had refused to withdraw paid material already set in type, though he had agreed not to print a second article before Monday. "Mr. Sloane heard the number," Osbert said, "and someone at Crayford House had access to my copied figures. That still does not prove which person supplied the article." "No." His answer came with visible restraint, but it narrows the field. The first consequence arrived before breakfast had been cleared. A patroness, who had promised to support the widows, sent a note withdrawing her name until the scandal was resolved. A second lady reclaimed her calling card through a footman rather than leave it upon the Halewick tray. Lady Ashcombe's message came soon afterward. She had postponed the formal committee meeting, not because she doubted Dinah, but because any inquiry held that day would be dismissed as a ducal defense arranged under pressure. She requested 2 days to secure the banking and theatre records properly. Dinah understood the reason. It still felt like society had granted the accusation immediate power and the truth an appointment later in the week. Mr. Bell's message arrived next. He asked whether he should issue a statement confirming that he had given Dinah counterfoil number 47 before the performance. Osbert read the note, wrote a reply, and sealed it. Dinah watched the wax cool. "What did you tell him? To wait until tomorrow." "Why?" "Because Crayford wants us to reveal the evidence in fragments, Mr. Bell's statement will be stronger beside the stub, the sealed strip, and the account records." "Did Mr. Bell ask for your judgment or your permission?" Osbert looked at the sealed reply. "He asked what he should do, and you decided for him. I advised him." "Did you tell him he was free to refuse your advice?" A brief silence followed. "No." Dinah folded the newspaper along its original crease. "A frightened witness may hear a duke's advice as an instruction. A frightened witness may also speak too soon and be discredited by one mistaken detail. Then tell him to speak only to what he saw." Osbert's expression tightened. "I am trying to preserve the case. The case does not belong to you, nor does it belong to Crayford. Then do not imitate him by deciding which voices may be heard." The Dowager Duchess, seated near the fire, lowered her reading glass. "Osbert, withdraw the instruction." He did not answer his mother. He looked at Dinah instead. "I will speak to Bell myself." "That is still not the same as leaving the choice to him." "No," he said, "it is not." Before he could alter the reply, a visitor was announced. Sir Cedric Vale, a political acquaintance of Osbert's, had called to discuss the article. The drawing-room doors remained open. Dinah heard the man's voice from the hall. "You cannot mean to keep Miss Marston beneath your roof after this." "The accusation is false," Osbert replied. Then let her deny it elsewhere. Every day she remains here makes the affair look personal. Miss Marston is under my protection. Any allegation against her will be answered through me." The sentence entered the morning room before Osbert did. Dinah's hand closed around the ribbon fastening of her reticule. Sir Cedric departed with no further protest. When Osbert returned, she was standing. "You gave your word on Friday." "I said I would not make a formal declaration. You have just made one to a man who will repeat it before luncheon. He insulted you beneath my roof. You could have answered the lie." "I did. After telling him my respectability rests beneath your authority." His control sharpened. "Would you prefer I allowed society to tear your name apart while I observe the distinction?" "I would prefer you defended the truth without claiming the woman attached to it." "Protection is not possession." "Then why does every protection you offer require someone else to obey?" He stopped. The Dowager Duchess rose, but did not intervene. Dinah took up her reticule. "I am going to Mrs. Trent." "Not today." The words came too quickly. "I was not asking. The article is everywhere. Crayford may have someone watching this house." "Then I will take the carriage and a proper companion." "Give me." "Until tomorrow." "Mrs. Trent was approached because she spoke to me. I will not leave her alone because society has printed my name." Dinah left the morning room and descended to the entrance hall. The Dowager's carriage stood before the house. She asked the butler to have it brought around fully. The man's face changed. "I beg your pardon, miss. His Grace instructed that no carriage is to take you out unless he has first been informed." For 1 second, Dinah heard nothing. The hall remained orderly. The footmen remained still. The brass key to her rooms rested in her pocket, but the front door had been closed in another person's name. Her right wrist had healed. Even so, memory returned with cruel precision, a cord tightening, a clasp bending, hands deciding that privacy could be suspended because suspicion had made it convenient. Osbert appeared at the head of the stairs. Dinah looked up at him. "You instructed the household to prevent me from leaving, to inform me before you left. The carriage has been refused." He came down the stairs. Then the instruction was carried too far. It was carried exactly far enough to make your decision real. The servants lowered their eyes. Osbert turned to the butler. "The carriage is at Miss Marston's disposal. No further permission is required." The man bowed and withdrew. The correction opened the door. It did not erase who had closed it. Dinah returned to the morning room because she would not finish the conversation before servants. Osbert followed. The Dowager Duchess shut the door behind them. Dinah set the damaged reticule upon the table between herself and the Duke. "Did you protect my name?" she asked. "Or did you take possession of it?" His face became still. "I am trying to keep you safe long enough to prove the truth. Mr. Bell was told to wait. A visitor was told. I stood under your protection. A carriage was denied because you had not approved me leaving. Someone stole evidence from you, planted a story in the press, and named details only the thief should know. And fear gave you the right to decide in my name. No. The answer came, softly, but not soon enough. No, it did not." Dinah looked at the man who had first seen what was missing when everyone else stared at a recovered jewel. She also saw the Duke, who had turned concern into household command, because command was the language he trusted most. "I am leaving Halewick House." Pain crossed his face before discipline concealed it. "Where will you go?" The Dowager Duchess answered. "To a widowed friend of her mother in Bloomsbury. I wrote to her yesterday in case Crayford House withheld Miss Marston's belongings. She has offered a room." Osbert looked at his mother, then at Dinah. "I won't prevent you." "You cannot." "No," he said, "I cannot." By evening, Dinah sat in the departing carriage beside the respectable widow who had come to receive her, with the Dowager Duchess opposite. Her small trunk was secured behind them. Her account summaries remained in her writing box. The strip remained with Mr. Latham. The ledger remained at Drury Lane. The damaged reticule remained in her hands. Osbert stood beneath the lamps of Halewick House as the carriage pulled away. He did not call after her. He did not command the driver to stop. For the first time, he protected her choice by allowing it to wound him. The room in Bloomsbury was smaller than Dinah's former bedchamber at Crayford House and less elegant than the apartment beside, the Dowager Duchess. But the key placed in her hand belonged to no one else's permission. Her mother's widowed friend stood beside the narrow bed while a maid set down Dinah's writing box and small trunk. "No one will enter unless you allow it," the widow said. "Not even me." Dinah looked at the plain iron key resting against her palm. "Thank you." "You needn't thank me for a locked door that answers to you." After the Dowager Duchess had departed and the house settled into evening quiet, Dinah turned the key herself. The sound was soft. It still felt larger than the closing of Halewick House behind her. She placed the blue watered silk reticule upon the small writing table. The bent silver clasp remained held by the narrow ribbon. The torn lining had not been repaired. Her right wrist had healed, but the memory of the cord returned whenever her fingers touched the damaged silk. She opened the reticule and checked its contents without hurry. 3 guineas, handkerchief, smelling salts, worn pencil. 4 notes. Nothing had been removed. Nothing had been added. Her original account summaries remained inside the locked writing box. The narrow strip from counterfoil number 47 remained with Mr. Latham in Chancery Lane. The matching stub remained sewn into the theatre ledger at Drury Lane. The main portion of the counterfoil remained missing. Those facts were unchanged, even if nearly everything surrounding them had shifted. A knock sounded below. Her hostess went to answer it, and returned carrying a sealed packet addressed in Osbert's hand. The Halewick footman said no reply was required. Dinah accepted the packet, but did not open it until the widow had seated herself beside the fire as witness. Inside lay a single inventory written in Osbert's clear hand. The sealed counterfoil strip remained with Mr. Latham. The original theatre ledger remained with Mr. Bell. Witnessed copies of Dinah's summaries remained in the Halewick study. Her originals, private papers, reticule, and writing box had left Halewick House untouched. Mr. Bell had been informed that the Duke's earlier request to delay a public statement was withdrawn. The household had been told that no carriage, visitor, letter, or movement connected to Miss Marston required ducal permission. At the bottom, Osbert had added one final sentence. "No object will be moved, copied, opened, or surrendered in your name without your knowledge and consent." Dinah read the line twice. There was no plea, no claim that fear had excused him, no request that she return. He had recorded the locations of the evidence because she had taught him that truth became safer when custody was named. More unsettling still, he had remembered every boundary he had crossed. "Will you answer?" her hostess asked. "Not tonight." "Because you are still angry?" "Yes." Dinah folded the inventory carefully. "But anger is no longer the only thing I feel." The widow returned to her mending. "That is often less comfortable." Dinah placed the inventory in her writing box rather than burn it or carry it near her heart. A promise mattered only if later conduct could be compared against it. The following morning, Monday, the 19th May, a second message arrived from Mr. Bell. Osbert had come to Drury Lane before 8 o'clock. He had withdrawn every request that the manager remain silent. Mr. Bell was free to issue a statement in his own name, provided he separated what he had witnessed from what he merely suspected. Dinah closed her eyes for one brief moment. Osbert had not sent another declaration of protection. He had restored another man's right to speak. It did not repair everything. It was the first repair that had not asked her to reward him for making it. She spent the rest of the morning with. The Observer spread flat upon the table. The article insulted her in several different ways, but insults were poor clues. Dinah ignored them. She marked claims. Counterfoil number 47 had been found among her private papers in the desk she used at Crayford House. She had altered relief accounts. She had used the Duke's interest to threaten the Crayford family. The amount printed beside the counterfoil matched the missing acknowledgement exactly. Dinah copied each assertion into her notebook, then underlined one phrase, found among her private papers. She had heard Lucasta use language like that for years, when a maid misplaced a ribbon. Lucasta never said it had been found in a drawer. She said it had been found among private things, as though privacy itself were evidence of guilt. At Lady Ashcombe's dinner, Lucasta had used the same construction when she implied that Dinah's papers had created the misunderstanding. Dinah read the newspaper again. The phrase did not prove authorship. It established familiarity. More important was what Lucasta had done in the theatre box. Her companion had pulled the reticule. Lucasta had bent over the scattered papers. Her gloved hand had disappeared beneath the handkerchief and notes. She had been near enough to take the folded counterfoil. Mr. Sloane had been near enough to know it was there. Dinah drew 3 columns on a clean page. Known, inferred, must be proved. Under known, she wrote that Sloane heard number 47 and had opportunity to see where Dinah placed it. The article knew both number and amount. Lucasta stood nearest the papers when the counterfoil vanished. Under inferred, she wrote that Sloane may have carried the information to Lucasta, and that Lucasta may have removed the paper during the staged search. Under must be proved. She wrote that the main counterfoil remained in Crayford possession, or that its contents had been copied before the theft. Her hostess entered with tea and another folded note. This came from Mrs. Trent. Dinah broke the plain seal. The widow wrote that a gentleman connected to the relief committee had called at her lodging that morning. He had advised her to withdraw her statement before she embarrassed herself publicly. He had offered no name, but he had known the amount she failed to receive and the date she spoke with Dinah. "They are frightening the witnesses," Dinah said. The widow set down the tea tray. "Will Mrs. Trent withdraw?" "No. She says she is afraid, but more afraid that another woman will be told silence is gratitude." Dinah read the final line again. Mrs. Trent had asked only that any future meeting include people who could not later deny what was said. The request clarified what Dinah had already begun to understand. An inquiry conducted inside Crayford House would belong to Anselm. An inquiry conducted inside Halewick House risked belonging to Osbert. The evidence had begun at the theatre. It would return there under witnesses chosen before anyone knew what answer might emerge. Dinah drew 3 sheets of paper toward her. The first letter went to Mr. Bell, requesting the subscription office for a formal reconstruction of counterfoil number 47's movement. The second went to Lady Ashcombe, asking her to attend as senior patroness and independent witness. The third required greater care. Dinah addressed it to Osbert Wetherell, Duke of Halewick. She informed him of the meeting, named the evidence to be reviewed, and stated that Mrs. Trent's intimidation made delay dangerous. Then she wrote the condition that mattered most. You are invited as witness and ally. The questions and order of evidence will remain mine. She sanded the ink and sealed all 3 letters with plain wax. Before luncheon, the replies began to arrive. Mr. Bell agreed. Lady Ashcombe would attend and bring the authority of the committee seal if required. Osbert's answer contained no defence, no revision to the plan, and no suggestion that Halewick House would be safer. It held only one sentence. What part would you have me play? Dinah rested her fingers upon the page. 2 days earlier, he had decided whether she could leave his house. Now he was asking where she wished him to stand. She had not forgiven him. Yet, for the first time since the carriage door closed, she could imagine that trust might be rebuilt without surrendering the key in her pocket. At 11 o'clock on Tuesday morning, Osbert Wetherell entered the subscription office at Drury Lane and stopped exactly where Dinah had told him to stand. He did not approach the ledger. He did not take the chair nearest the desk. He did not ask Mr. Bell for a report. He remained beside the closed door, while Lady Ashcombe sat near the window. Dinah's widowed hostess occupied the chair at her right, and the theatre treasurer joined Mr. Bell beside the locked safe. The room was small enough that every movement carried meaning. Dinah felt that before anyone spoke, her blue watered silk reticule rested against her skirt, its bent silver clasp secured by the narrow ribbon. The torn lining remained unrepaired. Counterfoil number 47's surviving strip remained sealed with Mr. Latham in Chancery Lane. The original ledger and its attached stub remained here under Mr. Bell's custody. Dinah had repeated those facts to herself in the carriage, not because she feared forgetting them, but because truth became harder to distort when every object had a named place. Mr. Bell unlocked the safe in the presence of the treasurer and drew out the subscription ledger. He set it upon the high desk, but kept one hand beside it. The volume has not left this office, he said. Every opening since Wednesday has been witnessed. Dinah nodded. Then we will begin with what each person saw, not with what any of us suspects. Lady Ashcombe inclined her head. Proceed, Miss Marston. Dinah opened her notebook. Mr. Bell issued a folded counterfoil to me before the performance on the 10th of May. He identified it as number 47. He saw me place it inside my reticule. I did, Mr. Bell said. Dinah looked toward the junior clerk. You saw Mr. Bell hand me a folded paper. Yes, miss. Could you read the number? No. Did you hear it spoken? Yes, Mr. Bell said, number 47. Who else was near enough to hear? The clerk glanced toward Lady Ashcombe, then at the Duke by the door. Osbert's face gave him no instruction. Mr. Sloane was near the acknowledgement desk. What did he do? He turned his head when the number was spoken. Then he left the passage. Could you swear he saw where I placed the paper? No, miss, only that he had the opportunity. Dinah wrote the answer exactly. Thank you. She looked around the room. During the interval, my reticule was emptied in the Crayford box. The main counterfoil disappeared. A torn strip remained behind the lining and was sealed that night. The article in the Observer later printed both the full number and the exact amount. Whoever supplied that information either saw the main paper or possessed it. Osbert's attention sharpened, but he remained silent. Dinah turned to Mr. Bell, now the ledger. He opened the volume to the entry, dated 10th May. Stub number 47 remained sewn into the binding. The amount, date, and brown ink matched Dinah's memory. Along the inner margin, nearly hidden where the page curved toward the spine, 2 faint letters appeared in pencil. C.B. Dinah. Leaned closer without touching the paper. Was that notation present when the counterfoil was issued? Mr. Bell frowned. I cannot say with certainty. Who adds pencil marks to this book? I do at times. So does the treasurer. A committee clerk may add a payment designation while checking acknowledgements. Do you recognize the hand? No. Osbert stepped away from the door by 1 pace. Crayford Bank. Dinah looked at him. That is an inference, a plausible one. Plausible is not proven. His jaw tightened from habit, then eased. What else could the initials mean, Mr. Bell answered before Dinah could. A beneficiary, perhaps. Or a bill designation. Some transfers are marked by the account they are meant to satisfy. Lady Ashcombe turned toward him. Would the bank retain a duplicate? For the charity's own account, yes. Deposit acknowledgements and transfer vouchers should be available if the committee requests them. Dinah looked at Lady Ashcombe. Then, we should request only records belonging to the relief fund, not private Crayford accounts. If the donations entered the charity account, and later moved under the designation C. B, the transfer voucher may identify the beneficiary without requiring access to anything beyond the committee's authority. And if the bank refuses, Osbert asked, then the committee may record that it requested its own account papers and was denied. Lady Ashcombe's expression hardened with approval. It will not be denied. She drew a sheet of paper toward her and began writing beneath the authority of the committee seal. The bank will provide duplicate deposit and transfer vouchers for the last 2 quarters, together with any committee authorization attached to those transfers. Mr. Latham will receive them directly. Dinah added, the originals should remain with the bank. Agreed. Mr. Bell pointed to the faint letters. Shall I copy this notation into the meeting record? Describe it, Dinah said. Do not darken it or trace it. The junior clerk moved to fetch a clean sheet. While he crossed the room, Osbert looked again at the entry. Sloane hears the number, later asks to replace the stub, and someone offers 200 guineas for the ledger. Now the margin carries initials connected to a transfer. That is a pattern, Dinah said. It is not yet the answer. You refuse to call a door open even when the hinges are visible, because someone may still have built a wall behind it. Lady Ashcombe's mouth almost curved. Your Grace, I suggest you learn to enjoy being corrected. It appears likely to continue. I am beginning to suspect so, Osbert said. The committee request was sealed before noon. Lady Ashcombe fixed the formal hearing for Friday morning in the theatre boardroom. Mr. Bell, the treasurer, Mr. Latham, Lord Crayford, Lady Lucasta, Mr. Sloane, and every trustee connected to the disbursements would be summoned. The ledger returned to the safe under 2 witnesses. The key remained with Mr. Bell, while the second key remained with the treasurer. No one removed the original entry. No one copied the margin except in descriptive words. When Lady Ashcombe and the others crossed into the adjoining office to inspect the safe's new lock, Dinah remained near the high desk, with her hostess visible through the open doorway. Osbert stayed beside the door until Dinah looked at him. Only then did he come closer. You followed my instructions, she said. I attended as invited. You disagreed with my method several times, and still you did not take control. I wanted to. The admission came without pride. When Bell mentioned the bank, I would have sent a man there before luncheon and demanded every Crayford record they possessed, which would have allowed Lord Crayford to claim ducal harassment and frightened the bank into silence. Yes, Osbert looked toward the sealed committee request. Your method is slower. It is also harder to dismiss. I know. The words held more weight than agreement. I was wrong at Halewick House. Dinah waited. He did not move nearer. I told myself danger gave urgency to every decision. Then I used urgency to decide for you, for Belle, and for the household. I won't call that protection again. What will you call it? Authority used where I had no right to use it. The apology was shorter than the wound. That made it more believable. Dinah rested one hand upon the ribbon, fastening of her reticule. Trust will not depend upon whether you agree with me. No, it will depend upon what you do when you believe your judgment is better. Osbert held her gaze. Then, judge me there. She gave no forgiveness. She also did not close the door he had finally learned not to force. That afternoon, Dinah returned to Bloomsbury with her hostess. A folded note waited upon the hall table. The servant who delivered it had claimed it came from Mr. Bell. Dinah did not open it at once. Official messages from the theatre bore a small seal pressed with the manager's device. This paper carried none. Mr. Bell signed his full surname, even in haste. The outside bore only a single initial. Dinah broke the seal in her hostess's presence and read the brief instruction inside. New evidence had been found. She was to come alone to the green room on Wednesday evening before Lady Ashcombe's hearing made discretion impossible. At the bottom stood the same single initial. Dinah read the wording twice, then placed the note flat upon the table. Whoever had written it knew that evidence frightened her less than secrecy did. They had simply mistaken which of those things she would obey. The forged note remained flat upon Dinah's writing table until her hostess had returned to the room and the mantel clock had struck 6. Only then did Dinah touch it again. Mr. Bell's official messages always carried the small theatre seal pressed beside his full surname. This paper bore neither. The writer had used a single initial, B, and had asked Dinah to come alone to the green room on Wednesday because new evidence could not safely be discussed before Lady Ashcombe's hearing. The request was meant to make secrecy sound urgent and obedience sound brave. Dinah placed the note inside a clean envelope without folding it again. Across the outer face, she wrote the hour it had arrived, the description given by the servant who delivered it, and the exact words used to identify its supposed sender. Her hostess read the record, corrected the time by 5 minutes, and signed beneath it. You intend to go, the widow said. Yes. Not alone? No. Dinah sealed the envelope with plain wax. Whoever wrote this believes I can still be separated from witnesses. I would like that belief to remain useful. By noon on Wednesday, the plan had been arranged. Mr. Bell confirmed that he had sent no note and granted access through the theatre's side entrance. Lady Ashcombe agreed to wait in the passage adjoining the green room with Dinah's hostess. Mr. Bell placed one trusted attendant near the rear door, visible only if someone looked for him. Osbert received a separate message naming the hour and the position Dinah wanted him to take near the carriage entrance. His reply contained no objection and no revised instructions. It asked one question. What part would you have me play? When Dinah arrived at Drury Lane that evening, the theatre stood between rehearsal and performance, full of muted footsteps, distant voices, and the faint smell of lamp oil. Osbert met them near the side corridor. His attention went first to the sealed envelope in Dinah's hand and then to her face. I dislike this plan, he said. That is not a reason to alter it. No. He looked toward the green room passage. What signal will you use? I will ask for Lady Ashcombe, and if you cannot, Mr. Bell's attendant will remain outside the rear door. My hostess will be beside Lady Ashcombe. No one enters until I call. The muscle in his jaw tightened. You have covered every approach except the one through which you will walk. That is why I invited you to watch it. He held her gaze for a moment. I won't enter unless Lady Ashcombe calls. Dinah believed the promise because she could see what it cost him. She entered the green room alone. A row of mirrors reflected candle flames and empty chairs. Powder dusted one table. A velvet cloak left from rehearsal hung upon a peg. Dinah placed the sealed envelope near the edge of a small table and kept one gloved hand beside it. The adjoining door remained almost closed, but not latched. At 8 precisely, the opposite door opened. Lady Lucasta Crayford stepped inside, wearing a dark cloak over a pale evening gown. She shut the door behind her without locking it. You came, she said. Someone went to considerable trouble to borrow Mr. Bell's name. Lucasta's eyes moved toward the envelope. You always did imagine plots where ordinary discretion would have served. Mr. Bell signs his full surname. Then perhaps his clerk wrote it. His clerk uses the theatre seal. Lucasta removed her gloves slowly, finger by finger. Her composure was exact, but fear had settled beneath it. This need not become unpleasant. That sentence has preceded nearly every unpleasant thing you have done to me. A faint flush rose in Lucasta's face. My father is prepared to restore your allowance. Your remaining belongings will be sent wherever you choose. The newspaper will print a clarification stating that the article exaggerated a private misunderstanding. In exchange for what? You will withdraw your claims against the Relief Committee. I have made no claim beyond what the figures show. Then you will say the figures were incomplete. They were incomplete. That is why the originals must be opened. Lucasta's control slipped. You shouldn't have taken the acknowledgement into the box. Dinah did not move. How did you know I had taken it there? Lucasta's face went still. Everyone knew you had been given some paper. Mr. Bell knew. His clerk knew. Mr. Sloane heard the number. No one else was told. Sloane reports to my father. Then he told you before the interval. Lucasta looked toward the door and then back at Dinah. You don't understand what was at stake. 4 widows' allowances. My father's bills. The house settlements. Every arrangement attached to the Crayford name. One public inquiry could ruin my prospects and place creditors at our door. So you chose women whose cold rooms would not be discussed at dinner. It was meant to be temporary. Mrs. Trent was told gratitude required silence. Lucasta's fingers closed around her gloves. You think yourself righteous because the Duke has noticed you. The Duke is not in this room. Not yet. The opposite door opened before Dinah could answer. Mr. Sloane entered, carrying a folded document. He looked first at Lucasta, then at the sealed envelope upon the table. This conversation is concluded. Dinah remained where she stood. You were not invited. Lord Crayford requires a written correction before Friday's committee meeting. He placed the document near her hand. You will state that you removed counterfoil number 47 from Crayford House, damaged it yourself, and used the theatre incident to conceal your conduct. I will not. Your allowance, lodging, and reputation can still be restored. Not by confessing to something I did not do. Sloane reached toward the sealed envelope. Dinah placed her hand over it. That is not yours. It was written under a false name. It should be destroyed. How do you know how it was signed? His hand stopped. Lucasta turned toward him. The silence revealed more than denial could have done. Dinah kept her voice level. The envelope has not been opened in your presence. You were not told it, bore only the initial B. Sloane recovered quickly, but not completely. The servant who delivered it reported the wording. The servant's description is sealed inside this record. Shall we ask him whether that is true? You are twisting a private attempt at settlement into evidence. Then let us make it public enough to be remembered. Dinah raised her voice only slightly. Lady Ashcombe. The adjoining door opened at once. Lady Ashcombe entered with Dinah's hostess beside her. Mr. Bell's attendant remained visible in the rear passage. Lucasta's color faded. Sloane drew the false statement back toward himself. This was meant to be private, Lucasta said. That is why it required witnesses, Dinah replied. Lady Ashcombe looked at the sealed envelope. Mr. Sloane, did you compose the note that brought Miss Marston here? I did not say that. You knew the signature before the envelope was opened before you. A misunderstanding. A familiar defense, Dinah said. Sloane's expression hardened. Lord Crayford will answer every relevant question on Friday, including how Lady Lucasta knew I carried the acknowledgement into the box, Dinah asked. Lucasta looked sharply at him. He ignored her. You have no complete paper. Then why does your statement require me to confess to damaging it? Sloane's restraint broke at last, because Lord Crayford will produce the paper on Friday and end this spectacle. Lady Ashcombe repeated the words with deliberate clarity. Produce the paper. Sloane seemed to hear his own admission only after she spoke it. Dinah lifted the sealed envelope from the table. This forged note will be deposited with Mr. Latham. The document you brought may also be copied before witnesses, if you choose to leave it. Sloane snatched the unsigned statement against his chest. You arranged a trap. No, Dinah said. I arranged witnesses. You supplied the truth. Lucasta moved toward the door, but paused beside Dinah. You have no idea what my father will do when cornered. I know what he has already done while unchallenged. Lady Ashcombe turned toward the passage. Your Grace, you may enter now. Only then did Osbert cross the threshold. His gaze went first to Dinah, confirming that she was unharmed. He did not confront Lucasta. He did not threaten Sloane. I heard Lady Ashcombe call, he said. Nothing before that moment will be attributed to me. Sloane left without another word. Lucasta followed him. Her cloak gathered tightly around her shoulders. Mr. Bell entered from the rear passage and recorded the hour, the names of every witness, and the words each person could swear had been spoken. Lady Ashcombe took temporary custody of the forged note and promised to deliver it directly to Mr. Latham that night. The false statement left with Sloane, but its purpose had been heard by 5 witnesses. When the others moved into the corridor, Dinah remained beside Osbert. You waited, she said. You told me to. You believed I might need you sooner. I did, and still you waited. His expression softened without becoming easy. I am learning that concern does not give me the right to decide in your name. Dinah looked at his sleeve. Then, by her own choice, she placed her hand upon it for one brief moment. That was the part I needed you to play. Before they left the theatre, Mr. Bell brought Lady Ashcombe's formal notice. The committee would meet on Friday morning. Lord Crayford had declared that he would present proof of Dinah's theft. For the first time since counterfoil number 47 disappeared, Dinah knew exactly where the missing paper would appear. The main portion of counterfoil number 47 returned to Drury Lane in Lady Lucasta Crayford's leather portfolio. On Friday morning, the 23rd of May, She carried it into the theatre boardroom, with both hands resting upon the clasp, as though the paper inside still belonged to her family. Lady Ashcombe presided at the long oak table. Mr. Bell stood beside the original subscription ledger, which had been brought from the theatre safe under the joint custody of the treasurer and junior clerk. Mr. Latham sat near a narrow dispatch box from Chancery Lane containing the sealed strip, the forged green room note, and the duplicate vouchers supplied from the Relief Fund's own banking account. Dinah sat between her widowed hostess and the Dowager Duchess. Her blue watered silk reticule rested in her lap, closed by the temporary ribbon loop. The damaged clasp remained bent. The torn lining remained unrepaired. Osbert stood behind Lady Ashcombe's chair, present by rank but silent by Dinah's arrangement. Across the table, Anselm Crayford looked less like a man answering an inquiry than a patron waiting for servants to correct an error. Mr. Sloane remained close to the wall. Lady Ashcombe opened the meeting without ceremony. Lord Crayford, you stated that you would produce proof Miss Marston stole the counterfoil. Anselm inclined his head toward Lucasta. My daughter will place the paper before you. Lucasta opened the portfolio. For the first time, her movements were not perfectly smooth. She drew out a folded piece of ivory paper and set it upon the clean cloth laid at the center of the table. Brown ink marked the number 47. The donation amount stood beneath it. A dark green wax smear crossed one side. The opposite edge had been torn away in an irregular line. Dinah felt no surprise. The green room admission had prepared her for possession. What struck her, instead, was the simplicity of the object. A narrow piece of paper had cost 4 widows' warmth, a poor relation her home, and a duke the illusion that power always knew the difference between shelter and control. Lady Ashcombe did not touch it. Where was this found? Among Miss Marston's private papers, Anselm said. In the desk she used at Crayford House. The wording matched the observer. It also matched Lucasta's manner of turning privacy into suspicion. By whom? Lady Ashcombe asked. A household servant. Name the servant. Anselm's mouth hardened. The committee is not entitled to summon every member of my household. The committee is entitled to know who allegedly found the paper used to accuse a woman of theft. Silence followed. Lucasta looked at her father. He did not look back. Lady Ashcombe turned to Mr. Latham. The solicitor unlocked the dispatch box and lifted out the envelope sealed on the night of the theatre incident. The signatures of Dinah, the Dowager Duchess, and Mr. Bell crossed the fold. The wax remained unbroken. This packet was received directly from Mr. Bell on the morning of the 11th May, he said. It has remained in my custody since that hour. Mr. Bell confirmed the transfer. The Dowager confirmed she had witnessed Dinah draw the strip from behind the torn lining. Dinah confirmed only what she had done herself. I opened the reticule. I found the paper caught behind the seam. I placed it in the envelope. Mr. Latham broke the seal. He removed the narrow ivory strip and laid it beside the main counterfoil. The room became still. The torn edges met exactly. The partial stroke on the strip completed the number. The green wax smear continued across both pieces in one broken mark. Lucasta's fingers tightened upon the leather portfolio. Miss Marston could have torn it herself. She said, the match proves only that the pieces belonged together. Yes, Dinah replied. So let us ask how the larger piece came into your possession. Lucasta's face lost color. Anselm answered for her. It was found in Miss Marston's desk. I left Drury Lane in the Halewick carriage, Dinah said. The Dowager Duchess sat beside me. I went directly to Halewick House and never returned to Crayford House. The Dowager confirmed the journey. Mr. Bell confirmed Dinah's departure from the theatre with the Halewicks. Lady Ashcombe looked at Lucasta. "Who gave you the paper?" "My father's household did." "That is not a person." Lucasta's gaze moved towards Sloane. The secretary remained motionless. Lady Ashcombe continued. "Did Mr. Sloane tell you before the interval that Miss Marston had received number 47? Lucasta looked at Anselm again. His expression warned rather than supported her. "He said she had taken an acknowledgement into the box," she answered at last. "He said it might concern the relief accounts." Dinah heard the room absorb the admission. "And then you declared your clasp missing." Lucasta's voice thinned. "I was told the paper should not leave the theatre. So you emptied my reticule to recover it." "I did not know the search would become public. You made it public when you accused me before the neighboring boxes." Mr. Sloane stepped forward. "Lady Lucasta misunderstood an instruction. Lord Crayford asked only that the committee paper be identified." The junior clerk looked toward Dinah, then at Lady Ashcombe. "I saw Mr. Sloane near the acknowledgement desk before the performance. He heard Mr. Bell say, 'Number 47. He left the passage immediately afterward. And on Monday, Mr. Bell added, he asked whether the matching stub could be removed and copied again." Sloane's composure tightened. "I sought correction of an entry. Without written authority," Mr. Bell said. Lady Ashcombe raised one hand. "The possession of the counterfoil and the attempt to change the stub concern the theft. We will now address the money." Mr. Latham opened a second packet. "These are duplicate vouchers, supplied under the committee's seal from the banking account belonging to the relief subscription. No private Crayford account has been examined." He placed the first voucher upon the cloth. It recorded the full donation attached to number 47 entering the charity account. A second voucher, dated 3 days later, recorded a transfer marked CB. The bank clerk's notation expanded the initials, Crayford bills. The endorsement shows that relief funds were applied toward bills personally guaranteed by Lord Crayford, Mr. Latham said. Anselm's expression did not alter. A temporary arrangement for committee expenses. The bills were not committee expenses. Mr. Latham placed an authorization beside the voucher. Anselm's initials appeared beneath the committee seal. An earlier undisputed authorization, produced by Mr. Bell, showed the same formation and pressure. More damaging still, the banking acknowledgement named Mr. Sloane as the messenger who presented the instruction. Lady Ashcombe looked toward the secretary. "Did you deliver this transfer authorization?" Sloane glanced at Anselm. "I delivered papers given to me in my employment." "By whom?" "Lord Crayford." The admission landed quietly. Anselm turned toward Lucasta with sudden coldness. "My daughter handled much of the charitable correspondence. If papers were removed or numbers altered, she acted beyond my knowledge." Lucasta stared at him. The shock in her face stripped away every social defense she had worn since the theatre. "You told me the acknowledgement would ruin us." "I told you nothing that required theft. You said the house settlements depended upon preventing an inquiry. A frightened young woman may hear what she wishes." Dinah watched Lucasta understand that loyalty had protected only one person in the Crayford family. The same man who had allowed Dinah to be searched was now willing to let his daughter bear the entire weight of the fraud. Dinah felt no urge to rescue Lucasta from consequence. She did feel the cruelty of the pattern. Anselm used women as shields, then blamed them for standing where he had placed them. Lady Ashcombe called the committee to order. The resolution was read and voted without delay. Anselm Crayford was removed immediately from the trusteeship. Every diverted sum would be restored with arrears and interest. The relief accounts would undergo an independent quarterly review. A public correction would be made before the benefit performance on Saturday evening. Mr. Sloane was barred from all access to relief records pending a written deposition delivered to Mr. Latham. The forged green room note would remain in the solicitor's custody. The joined counterfoil pieces would also pass to him after the hearing. The original theatre ledger would return to Mr. Bell's archive. Anselm rose before the signatures were complete. You believe an audience will accept the judgment of a dependent woman over that of a Marquess. Dinah met his gaze. The judgment is not mine. The records agree without me. London will not care. Lady Ashcombe folded the signed resolution. Then London will hear the correction where London first watched Miss Marston humiliated. Anselm left without offering Lucasta his arm. For one stunned moment, she remained seated beside the empty chair. Then she gathered the leather portfolio, now stripped of the paper it had carried, and followed him alone. On the table, counterfoil number 47 lay whole enough to reveal the theft. What remained uncertain was whether truth would retain the same shape when placed before the theatre that had once preferred spectacle. The Crayford patrons' box was already lit when Dinah entered the Theatre Royal on Saturday evening, and for one suspended moment the sight of its crimson velvet rail returned every scattered object to her memory. 3 guineas rolling beneath candlelight. Mrs. Trent's name exposed upon an opened note. A cord tightening around her right wrist. Lucasta's gloved hand disappearing among the papers. Nothing in the theatre had changed. The chandeliers still burned above the tiers. Opera glasses still turned toward every arrival. The audience still possessed the dangerous confidence of people who believed observation required no responsibility. Yet, Dinah did not enter behind the Crayfords now. She walked into the Halewick box beside the Dowager Duchess and Lady Ashcombe, followed by 2 senior patronesses of the relief subscription. Her blue watered silk reticule hung from her wrist, its bent clasp secured by the narrow ribbon and its torn lining still unrepaired. She had brought it because hiding the damage would have allowed others to call it shame. She would not open it. Across the auditorium, Anselm Crayford sat rigidly at the front of his box. Lucasta occupied the chair beside him in pale green silk, her face composed with such care that the effort showed. Mr. Sloane was nowhere visible. Osbert entered last. He did not position himself before Dinah or place a hand at her back. He stood 1 pace to her left, close enough to answer a threat to the proceedings and far enough to leave her fully seen. Below, the orchestra finished tuning. Before the curtain rose, Mr. Bell stepped onto the stage. The original subscription ledger remained at the records table near the stage entrance under the joint custody of the theatre treasurer and junior clerk. Mr. Latham sat in the front row, with the joined counterfoil pieces and charity vouchers secured inside his dispatch case. No private paper had been removed from its custodian. No evidence depended upon the Duke's possession. Mr. Bell waited until the murmur diminished. Ladies and gentlemen, before tonight's benefit performance begins, the actor's widow's relief subscription must correct a false accusation made in connection with this theatre. Anselm rose at once. You will do no such thing. The orchestra fell silent. Heads turned toward the Crayford box. Lady Ashcombe stood beside Dinah. The committee voted yesterday. The correction will be heard. "The committee has been manipulated by His Grace of Halewick," Anselm said. "This is political vengeance dressed as charity." Every face turned toward Osbert. He stepped to the rail, but did not look at the audience first. He looked across at Anselm. "When Miss Marston's possessions were emptied in your box, I asked whether the patron would state the accusation in his own name. You declined. Tonight you have named me instead. I will ask once more. Will the patron of that box answer the evidence in his own name?" Anselm's mouth hardened. "There is no evidence. There is a dependent woman who discovered that scandal improved her position." Dinah rose. Osbert stepped back. The movement was slight, yet it changed the entire balance of the box. "Then I will state what the records show," she said. Her voice was not loud, but the theatre had become quiet enough to carry it. "On the 10th of May, Mr. Bell issued counterfoil number 47 to me before the performance. He saw me place the whole paper inside this reticule." She rested one hand lightly upon the blue silk, but did not open it. Mr. Sloane stood near enough to hear the number and had the opportunity to see where I placed it. During the interval, Lady Lucasta declared that her diamond clasp was missing. My reticule was emptied before the surrounding boxes. The clasp was later found beneath a cushion beside Lady Lucasta's opera glass. The counterfoil was gone. A stir moved through the tiers. Lucasta gripped the rail. Dinah continued. The reticule's clasp had been bent and its lining torn. In the ladies' retiring room, before the Dowager Duchess, Mr. Bell, the house matron, and His Grace, I found a narrow strip of ivory paper caught behind that lining. It was sealed that night and delivered by Mr. Bell to Mr. Latham the following morning. It remained in his custody until yesterday. Mr. Latham stood and lifted the closed dispatch case. The signatures across the seal were intact when the packet was opened before the committee. Mr. Bell signaled to the records table. The junior clerk opened the theatre ledger to the relevant page, while the treasurer remained beside him. "Stub number 47 remains attached to the original entry," Mr. Bell said. "The number, ink, paper, and donation amount correspond to the counterfoil I issued." Dinah looked across at Lucasta. Yesterday, Lady Lucasta produced the main portion of that counterfoil from her own portfolio. Its torn edge matched the sealed strip exactly. The green wax mark continued across both pieces. The newspaper article, published for the hearing, contained the number and amount written upon the missing main portion. Lucasta rose. Her composure fractured not with tears, but with anger sharpened by fear. "I was protecting my father." Anselm turned toward her. "Sit down." She did not. Dinah held her gaze. "Protection does not turn humiliation into innocence." "You don't understand what would have happened to us," Lucasta said. "The house settlements were failing. Creditors were already watching. My father said an inquiry would ruin the Crayford name. So you chose women whose cold rooms would not be discussed in Parliament or drawing rooms. It was temporary." "Mrs." Trent was told gratitude required silence. Lucasta's lips parted, but no answer came. Anselm struck the rail once with his palm, a sharp sound rather than a violent one. This theatre did not gather to hear moral instruction from Miss Marston. Lady Ashcombe opened the signed committee resolution. "Then it will hear the committee's decision." She read each consequence clearly. Anselm Crayford had been removed from the trusteeship with immediate effect. Every diverted sum would be restored with arrears and interest. Written corrections would be sent to all subscribers who had received the false report. The 4 widows identified in Dinah's summaries would receive their unpaid allowances without delay. Future disbursements would require signed acknowledgements and independent quarterly review. Mr. Sloane was barred from all access to relief records pending his written deposition to Mr. Latham. "You believe a committee can erase a Marquess?" Anselm demanded. "No," Dinah said, "only his access to money that was never his." Anselm looked at Lucasta, as though she had become another failed instrument. Then he left the box without offering her his arm. Lucasta remained standing beside the empty chair for several heartbeats before gathering her cloak and following alone. Mr. Bell raised one hand before the audience could begin murmuring again. "There is a separate decision concerning this theatre. By order of its proprietors, the Crayford box lease will not be renewed after the present term. The grounds are the use of these premises to stage a public accusation and the attempted interference with theatre records. The consequence belonged to the theatre, not the charity committee, and the distinction made it impossible for Anselm to call it procedural confusion." No one applauded. Instead, an elderly patroness from the opposite tier rose, left her own box, crossed the passage, and entered Halewick's. She took the empty chair beside Dinah. A second woman followed. Then a third. They did not praise her. They simply chose where to sit. The gesture carried more weight than noise could have done. Osbert stepped once more to the rail. "There is another correction." Dinah turned toward him. He looked at her, though his words were meant for everyone. "Miss Marston was not wronged only by those who accused her. I restricted her movements. I delayed a witness who wished to speak. I used fear as authority and called it protection. She was right to leave my house." A duke's public apology altered the air, but Osbert did not use that silence to ask for forgiveness. "I do not ask society to interpret my respect as possession," he continued. "What follows belongs to her choice." Dinah felt the damaged clasp beneath her fingers. 2 weeks earlier, the theatre had watched private objects spill across velvet without her consent. Tonight the evidence had been placed upon clean tables, moved only by its custodians, and spoken in an order she had chosen. She drew the ribbon loop through the bent clasp and closed the reticule with her own hand. "The truth has been heard," she said. "The future is not for this theatre to decide." By August, Dinah's name appeared beneath no accusation, but beneath the title Recording Secretary and Treasurer of the Actors' Widows' Relief Subscription. She signed the quarterly register in the committee room at Drury Lane, while Lady Ashcombe and Mr. Bell witnessed the first accounts prepared under the new charter. Every payment now required a signed or witnessed acknowledgement. Collection and disbursement could no longer be approved by the same hand. No patron's private obligation could be charged against charitable credit, and an independent review would take place at the end of every quarter. Dinah's salary was entered openly beside the other administrative expenses. It was not a favor from the Duke of Halewick, not gratitude from a committee embarrassed by scandal, and not an allowance that could vanish when she displeased a household. It was payment for work. Mrs. Trent's final arrears had been delivered in full, as had the missing allowances owed to Margaret Vale, Anne Pritchard, and Ruth Miller. Anselm Crayford had sold a portion of unentailed property to restore the diverted funds with interest. His name disappeared from charitable lists before it disappeared from invitations. But society eventually learned to treat both absences as related. Mr. Sloane lost his post after Anselm dismissed him in anger. He was required to give a written deposition to Mr. Latham and was barred from handling charitable records. Lady Lucasta left London to live with a married aunt in the country. She did not become poor, nor did she regain the easy welcome she had once considered permanent. Dinah took no pleasure in any of it. Justice had never required her to enjoy another woman's fall. It required the widows to be paid, the records to be protected, and those who had used rank as concealment to lose access to the thing they had abused. The invitation to Halewick Park arrived in the Dowager Duchess's hand. It requested 1 week in Kent and contained no private message from Osbert. Dinah accepted only after the committee confirmed it could spare her. The journey occupied most of a warm August day. When the carriage turned beneath the stone arch of Halewick Park, the house appeared beyond broad lawns and fields beginning to pale toward harvest. Osbert received her beside his mother, not alone. He bowed and waited until Dinah offered her hand. "Welcome to Halewick Park, Miss Marston." "Thank you, Your Grace." The Dowager Duchess removed her gloves. "My son has been instructed not to behave as though he arranged your visit." Osbert looked resigned. "I have been informed that accuracy must be preserved even in hospitality." Dinah felt a smile rise before she chose to suppress it. "Then the household is already improving." During the days that followed, Osbert did not attempt to overwhelm her with attention. He showed her the estate accounts because she asked to see them. When she questioned a grain allowance entered without the recipient's mark, he did not defend the steward from habit. He requested the original household book and asked the tenant to confirm receipt. At dinner, he listened when his mother contradicted him. During a meeting with 2 farmers, one man objected to a drainage plan Osbert clearly favored. Dinah watched the old instinct gather in his posture. Then he asked the farmer to explain the objection fully. The plan was revised before the meeting ended. Osbert never looked toward Dinah for praise. That mattered more than any display arranged for her benefit. On the 4th afternoon, he brought a draft of the relief charter to the South Terrace, where the Dowager Duchess remained visible through the open drawing-room doors. Dinah read the final page. Her name appeared beneath the words, drafted in consultation with Miss Dinah Marston, recording secretary and treasurer. "You credited me," she said, "only after Mr. Latham showed me your written permission. You asked permission to use my name. I have learned that names, papers, carriages, and rooms should not be governed by assumption." She looked across the table. "The charter is good. That sounds dangerously like approval. Do not become vain. I have marked 6 corrections." He accepted the pages. "I feared you might offer only 5. They walked later along the terrace, where the stone still held the day's warmth. At the far end, Osbert stopped beside the balustrade. The fields beyond lay quiet beneath the lowering sun. "There is something I have wanted to ask since May." Dinah's hand rested lightly upon his sleeve because she had chosen to take his arm when the path narrowed. "You have waited until August." Waiting was part of the question. He turned toward her. "I do not want gratitude disguised as affection. I do not want a wife who remains, because leaving would cost her home, income, or name. I want a partner who will tell me when authority has made me foolish, and who knows she may walk away if I ever stop listening." His composure did not break, but it opened enough for her to see what the words cost. "Dinah, will you marry me?" She studied him in the fading light. Would the Duchess of Halewick continue receiving a salary? She would insist upon it. Would she retain her office? The marriage settlement will protect it. Would she keep her private papers under lock, seal, and whatever other defenses she considers necessary? Would you permit her to audit your charities? I suspect permission would be irrelevant. Her laughter came softly. His answering smile was unguarded. Then yes, she said. Not because you defended me at the theatre. I know. Not because society expects me to be grateful. I know. Because I have watched what you do when no audience is present. Osbert lifted her hand, then paused. May I? You may. Their wedding took place in the autumn, quiet enough to preserve meaning and public enough to leave no room for secrecy. The marriage settlement confirmed that Dinah's salary belonged to her, that her professional office would continue, and that her papers remained under her sole control. By December, Dinah, Duchess of Halewick, worked each morning in a room of her own at Halewick Park. Relief correspondents shared the desk with estate accounts. No servant removed the papers when visitors entered. No committee letter passed through Osbert's study unless Dinah sent it there. The joined pieces of counterfoil number 47, the bank vouchers, and the forged green room note remained in Mr. Latham's archive in Chancery Lane. The original theatre ledger remained with Mr. Bell at Drury Lane. The blue watered silk reticule rested upon Dinah's work table. She had repaired it herself. A new silver clasp closed cleanly, but the old seam remained visible beneath careful stitches. She had refused to replace the lining. Healing did not require pretending that nothing had torn. On a cold afternoon before Christmas, Dinah placed Mrs. Trent's final acknowledgement inside the reticule. It confirmed that every promised pound had been received. Osbert entered as the pale winter light faded across the desk. He reached toward the reticule, then stopped before touching it. May I? Dinah looked at the repaired clasp, the visible seam, and the man who had once believed fear gave him the right to decide in her name. She closed the reticule with her own hand and set it upon the table. Yes, she said, and gave him her hand instead. The reticule remained where she had placed it, closed against every hand except the one she chose to trust.